Okay, welcome back to the Pilipinx-American Stories podcast. I am your host, Alfredo, and we here at the podcast are here to better understand different aspects of Filipinx-American diaspora. We cover topics such as, but not limited to, community history, individuals, and Filipinx-American culture. And for today's guest, he is a performer based out of San Diego. He is an ethnomusicologist, and he's just an overall artist that I've known for quite a long time. I think maybe like 5 years or so. We got Bernard Ellorin. What's up, Bernard?
Hey, how's it going?
It's going pretty good, man. It's going pretty good. So you've been doing music for like as long as I can remember. You've performed at I think maybe like 10 years worth of like festivals from the time I've known you or the times I've seen you.
Mm-hmm.
I think, right?
Yes.
So the first question I have for you is how did you or what was the driving force that got you into music in the first place?
It's all attributed to my mother. She was passionate about Philippine culture and the arts. And at a young age, while I was taking piano lessons, she noticed that, I started picking up quickly how to play the piano, all the classical compositions. And she wanted me to learn about Philippine music because at the time, an alumnus from her organization, her UP alumni, University of the Philippines Alumni Association, was the executive director of the Samahan Filipino American Performing Arts and Education Center, what was then the Samahan Philippine Dance Company, the late Dr. Lolita Carter. And at the time, my mother was recruited to learn cultural dances and music. And she was initially involved in the Samahan Rondalla, which is a Spanish influenced stringed ensemble. But then she decided that she would have her youngest son learn how to play the rondalla instead. And so that sparked my interest about learning Philippine culture through the arts because during the 80s and 90s, we lacked representation of Philippine culture in the media. And at the time, there was a negative stigma about the Philippines, because of corrupt dictators. I grew up in the time when like the Marcos regime was going to be overthrown, and there wasn't that much representation, and that's all that we had. So, learning about Philippine culture through a nonprofit organization was a positive outlet for me, and it inspired me to learn more about my heritage while appreciating various genres of music, whether it be classical to traditional Philippine music. And I used it as a form of learning about my cultural identity positively. And I just gravitated towards it since then. And I've been fascinated about various genres of Philippine music because it's a tangible um, art form that I can grab onto, so to speak. And it's just all about like kind
So,
of learning about my identity through the arts that sparked the passion.
so in a sense, it was like second nature when you picked it up, or like when your mom started teaching you Rendalia, it was like second nature from when you started learning music in general, right?
Yes, it was. So she enrolled me in piano lessons, and then once she had me take rondalla lessons, yeah, it kind of was second nature, and it had like the same concepts of melody, harmony, rhythm, except I was learning more about traditional melodies used for dance accompaniment and for folk songs.
Oh, okay. So since you did bring that up, you currently perform with Samahan Dance Company, which you mentioned before, and Pakaragurin Kulintang Ensemble, also known as PKE. So can you talk about what those two are exactly? Specifically PKE, since you're more involved in that as a musician.
Well, here's the thing. So, just to clarify, um, both the Rendalia ensemble and the Pakaragurin Kulintang ensemble are music ensembles for Samahan, the education center or the performing
Mm.
arts company. And um, PKE was established in the early 2000s when I was at UCLA after I got my bachelor's. Um, I gathered, a bunch of my friends who have the same passion for Philippine culture and the arts. And we were all students in 2 degrees at UCLA, ethnomusicology and world arts and cultures. And all of us were there at UCLA at the time. We were all passionate about Philippine culture, and we were invited to give so many guest lectures on cultural dances and musics that we just decided to form an ensemble. So in 2003, after I got my bachelor's, I moved back to San Diego and I incorporated um, my close colleagues and musicians who were also part of Samahan's music ensembles to be involved in PKE. And so we developed the San Diego branch because it started out at UCLA. There's two branches of PKE. There's the LA branch, and then there's the San Diego branch that I'm the artistic director for. And the San Diego branch is actually an educational component of Samahan. And the mission statement that we have is to promote and preserve Southern Philippine cultural arts from the Muslim societies of the Philippines with integrity and respect, because many of us have had the privilege to study with native practitioners this genre of indigenous Philippine music, and we have a responsibility to kind of continue the preservation of this art form that remains true to many of the native practitioners that we've studied under. And then the Rondalla ensemble, I've been involved with it. That was actually my first genre of Philippine music I was ever exposed to. I've been involved with it since age 10. And it was only fairly recently that I became the Rondalla director or conductor back in 2018 when I finally moved back to San Diego after working out of town several adjunct positions. And so when I got a teaching position at Miramar College, that's when I started to kind of further rebuild or develop the Rondalla ensemble for Samahan. Yeah, so they're both ensembles that are part of Samahan's educational components. It's just PKE. They have two different branches in two cities.
So when you talk about PKE and the Rendalia ensemble and preserving and everything like that, is performing essentially the main way that you preserve the culture?
Well, that's one aspect, and then we've also give several educational workshops um for various colleges, and then guest lectures that are both performative and educational at the same time. But I think just practicing it on a regular basis, and also just playing it as a form of leisure, I think that's another way of also maintaining the art form as well. I mean, that's just one aspect of continuing it. I mean, if we're living here in the diaspora, that's kind of been the way in which it's been preserved is through the performative aspect, because a lot of what we do is already out of context from like its place of origin. So it's just inadvertently been kind of what we've done here as Filipino Americans to maintain the art form.
Okay, so going back to just the theme of education and everything, you're currently a teacher over at Miracosta College as well as Miramar. Did you know that you wanted to teach music as a college professor?
Um, I think eventually I realized that's what I was passionate about after majoring in that degree in ethnomusicology, because as I was invited to give more guest lectures and presentations on Philippine music, it just dawned on me that, maybe I should start educating others about the diversity of different genres of music from other cultures, as from various cultures as well. because that's what kind of the discipline of ethnomusicology is all about, the study of music as culture. And and I realized, it to better understand the world around us, it's like, why don't we educate others about a universal need, which is music? And it's just over time I realized, yeah, this is kind of a profession I want to pursue and get better at, because I'm always furthering or learning how to further hone my teaching pedagogy. And yeah, I over time I've realized, I think when I got my doctorate, that yeah, I do have a passion for teaching about, various genres of music, and especially Philippine music.
I think I see what you mean. So like the whole purpose of, or the whole driving force between for ethnomusicologists is really to help people understand and connect to different cultures. Am I right?
Yes.
And that's the main theme for your pedagogy as a teacher, right?
Hmm.
And as a teacher and a musician, what kind of difficulties have you encountered?
As a teacher and a musician, I think um teaching non-musicians in general how to like have further grasp of the terminologies and the pedagogies, and then um because going into music, teaching music survey courses, everyone thinks that they're just going to passively listen to music. To some extent that's true, but when you're taking a survey course, for example, there's a lot of technical terminologies and then historical backgrounds that you have to cover in order to understand that genre of music. And so what I'm having difficulty is kind of getting students to really understand that you can passively listen to music, but it's also important to know kind of the historical background, as well as its the fundamentals of music. So I think,
Oh yeah, most definitely. Because
yeah.
if you're just listening to it as it is,
Hmm.
there's only going to be a surface level of understanding. You're just like, oh, okay, here's like some technical aspects, but there's more to it than just what you're just like hearing right off the bat. And that's one of the
Exactly.
struggles that. Mm.
Hmm.
So when it comes to just being a musician and everything, like, what kind of artistic struggles have you come across when you're developing like these performances, like any kind of pieces that you're doing, just any struggles that you have encountered as someone that's done like Kulintang or Rendalia?
I think what I'm always having to work on, and always keeping in mind, is I need to know who my audience is, and always having to adjust, who am I performing for? What material can they easily digest within either that 2 hour or that 20 to 30 minute set? It's just knowing my audience beforehand, as well as when I arrive to that stage, is kind of the struggles, or kind of not challenges, but what I usually go through. And so it's like trying to adjust on a whim is typically kind of like some of the things that I have to deal with when I'm performing or when I'm giving a guest lecture. So it's
Can you
all
give an
about,
example of what that means? Like you're adapting to the situation?
yeah, adapting to the situation. Exactly. Like, for example, if there's certain material I have to cut out, or say, for example, I'm giving a guest lecture for an elementary school assembly. I mean, I'm not going to throw in so much technical terminologies. I'm going to throw in kind of something that's light and easily digestible for a certain age group. And then when it comes to, say, giving a workshop for college students, make it relatable to their experience, especially PCNs. Yes, PCNs, and having like a resource for Philippine culture that's accessible.
So you basically have like this you have like this foundational aspect of what you're trying to teach, but then you have different levels depending on what situation
Exactly.
you've encountered, right?
Exactly.
Man, that must be hard. Like how do you get used to that kind of stuff? Is it just doing that over and over again?
Yeah, it's rehearsing it and then brainstorming it with members of your ensemble, just having a dry run. Because when I was in graduate school, we learned about the concept of a dry run. It's like before you give any presentation, you have to give feedback and then rehearse it in advance. And I've just gotten used, like over the years, over the past, I'd say 16 years or close to I'd say 17 years that PKE has been performing, I'm kind of aware that, okay, um, this is the repertoire that would probably get this audience going, or this is the repertoire that would most likely be more appropriate for intimate spaces. So, yeah, just finding out like the venue and who's going to be present um, in advance and then kind of adjusting, being able to be flexible is kind of like the key to developing repertoire or presentations overall. Just about that, having that flexibility at the same time. Um, yeah, sticking to your plan.
Do you happen to have a memory of like how this like first began, like the first time you realized that you had to adapt to that kind of thing?
It all started when I gave my first lecture at UCLA, and this was when I was a first year transfer student. First year transfer student at UCLA, and I was in charge of giving a lecture on music of the Philippines. And so I had to adjust the content based on what we covered in class and then who I intended to invite, who's a specialist at certain genres. So that was when I learned how to adjust and, you know, um, kind of develop an outline for how to give presentations. So that was like my first experience, really.
Since we're heavily talking about like the audience and what they want or what you're trying to like make them get out of it, what is the kind of reaction or the responses you want people to have when listening or just understanding the craft that you're putting forward?
I'd like people to understand since I'm playing diverse genres of Philippine music that the Philippines in general or Philippine cultural arts is heterogeneous and there's diverse genres of music that are unique in its own right, and and it has its own level of sophistication. That's what I want to put forward, um, especially in all of the presentations that I do for like Philippine cultural dances and musics. So I think just acknowledging diversity and then also the audiences to be aware that there are, master artists or there's cultural bearers, who predate even my performances or who are still continuing these living traditions in its place of origin. That's one thing I want them to take away that what I do is a living tradition and it's a living art form that um, is alive to this day.
And you're just one of the people that's partaking in that tradition when you're doing these kinds of
Exactly.
things, like these performances, these lectures, everything.
Hmm.
Okay, so when it comes to your artistic process, what is something people don't really see on the surface level?
The amount of time that we rehearse for it, the material culture that I've acquired over the years, it's, many of it is out of pocket. There's only a select few things that I've acquired based on grants. So it comes from years of uh, reaching out to native practitioners, Um, at the same time, applying for grants to do research. A lot of people don't understand that what you're paying us for like $450 is actually a couple of thousands worth of research based material.
I'm happy that you brought that point up because a lot of people just don't really understand the value of an artist and the fact that you're bringing it up, especially for an art that I personally don't see as much other than you and like a few others. Like there is so much that goes on behind the scenes that people really need to understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
And
thank you.
like,
Go ahead, sorry.
can you give like a tip of? Oh wait, yeah, no, go ahead.
And I'd like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to share, like what the process is when it comes to like being a Philippine cultural artist. But yeah, you were saying, sorry?
Oh, of course, because like you performed at several like I can't even count how many events you performed at that like I've had to stage manage for and just like even though it's like what this I don't know, maybe like this 30-minute performance, there's probably like countless hours that goes on to like each performance and everything and there's like adaptions like you said, there's so many gears that turn that people aren't really seeing. They're just seeing like this surface level of this performance. They're just like, "Oh, this is pretty cool," but there's more to it than just what they're seeing on the stage or just what they're hearing from the instruments and everything.
There's a history behind it. There's countless native practitioners behind the repertoire that I gathered and were put together, and I'm only giving you a snippet of what I've been exposed to.
Just like a few minutes of it and it's like it's way more that is like wow and you're still learning and you're still doing the research about it too.
And I still consider myself a student. I'm going to be a lifelong student in this tradition because there's a lot of material that I still need to learn or stuff that I've overlooked or I need a refresher on. And case in point, back in July of 2019, a group of my colleagues, in Samahan who are also leaders, we went on a field research trip through the sponsorship of the Lolita Carter Foundation Endowment Fund. And a lot of the material that I gathered on this last trip, it's like a different perspective or something that I've never really been exposed to in my 26 years of playing Kulintang music or rondalla music in general. And so it was a huge eye opener. And through that, I realized there's always something new or something old that becomes new that pops up whenever you continue to be a lifelong learner or a student of your craft.
I remember seeing that trip on Instagram, on Facebook. We were in the same time zone for a little bit.
Really?
Yeah, because I think I was in Vietnam when you were still like in Thailand, I think, right?
Oh, yeah, I was in
I
Thailand.
know you were somewhere in Southeast Asia when I was in Vietnam.
Oh, okay.
Oh, but just leading up, so the question I have just for like viewers and just hoping you can answer this as well, but I mean, you've answered this a little bit, but why is it important to continue this constant learning of music craft and just in terms of ethnomusicology?
Is it what? I'm sorry?
Oh, why is it important to continue learning or continue researching and continue learning about like music in terms of ethnomusicology, like how it connects to the culture and everything? Like, why is that important for people to understand?
It's important for people to understand because, you know, um, as I've mentioned earlier, music is a universal need. If we didn't have music, life would be dull. And obviously, we're making it through this pandemic through the arts. So music is one of them. I've seen several live streams where various performers are like performing different genres of music, and I think it's important to have a better understanding of where the music originates from in order to avoid kind of assumptions about about different cultures or stereotypes for that matter. And like the discipline of ethnic studies, I think ethnomusicology serves that purpose in a music sense, because we all need music, and what better way to have a understanding of the people in which the music originates from than to study its history, its subtle nuances, and its culture behind it.
And just going off that last point that you made, it's so important to preserve that because if it's not preserved properly or if it's not practiced properly and everything, that stuff kind of just like it gets lost and some people won't be able to like truly understand it. These stereotypes are made, like these misconceptions that have lasted like I don't know like how long are still perpetuated. So that's why I personally feel like it's important to continue like that lifelong learning process. Like you said, new things pop up every time, and it's like this new way of incorporating that knowledge into like what you're learning right now, and then eventually passing down that knowledge to people to better understand it. So it's like that cycle continues going.
Exactly.
And I want to thank you for being on the podcast. Honestly, I love whenever like you're speaking about this and just giving people and myself like the rundown on just like the music world, the world of ethnomusicology. I mean, we're in a pandemic right now. We're in quarantine. But do you have any upcoming projects that you have in the future, or hopefully like during this year?
Well, I'm hoping that if the quarantine is lifted, I like safely, not like abruptly, but safely within the next couple months. I mean, Samahan, to support nonprofit cultural arts organizations, we are having our annual concert of Philippine musics and dance, which will be scheduled for October. And that is probably the foreseeable project that will be coming up this year or towards the end of this year. But if that doesn't happen, 2021, we're all safe and healthy. There will be several collaborative projects with House of the Philippines and then our sibling performing arts company, Pasakat, with the taste of the Philippines. And then we'll probably be able to resume a lot of the upcoming concerts for our junior performers. And then I may hold some concerts at the colleges that I'm working at, Miracosta. So those are some potential or tentative um, concerts that are coming up, or performances or projects that I have in mind or will be a part of probably later next year, crossing fingers, or probably as next year.
And I am. And wait, and just to clarify, those are all within San Diego County, right?
Correct. Yes.
I'm really hoping that this pandemic lifts up in a very safe manner, not like how it is right now, where everyone's like just trying to go out and stuff right now. You know what I mean? I'm really hoping that things will turn out for the better because I'm really looking forward to the events that you have. Like you always, like for the people that don't know, you Samahan, PKE, the Rendalia Ensemble, like you put out high quality events,
Hmm.
and like the the work that you put behind it is like so amazing. Y'all really, for the audience that's listening, y'all really got to go out to some of these events when you get the chance when this pandemic is lifted. And
Yes.
that being said, do you have anywhere where like the listeners can find you at any social media plugs for Samahan, PKE, or yourself?
Um, Definitely follow us on Facebook, Samahan Filipino American Performing Arts and Education Center, and Pakaragurin Kulintang Ensemble. And then there's also Instagram. And also Instagram, we have our accounts. Um, I can probably send you a link later through the chat. And
The link will be in the description for people
yeah,
to follow later on.
sure. And then
But yeah, stay up to date. Oh,
yeah. And then we also
oh
have
wait, no, go
Zoom
ahead. My bad.
classes. Yeah, we have Zoom classes. So if anyone's interested in learning about cultural dances, and then I'll be starting up some Zoom sessions for music, informative like background on different genres of Philippine music, probably in about a couple weeks or so. Yeah, I'll be more than happy to send over links for that.
Yo, link me to that because I'm trying to take those informative classes.
Oh, excellent.
But yeah, stay for the listeners that are have made it this far. Make sure to stay up to date with TKE, Samahan Dance Company, and Bernard on all social media platforms. And we want to thank y'all for listening to this episode, and we will catch you on the next one. Thanks.